What are some true scary experiences that you Redditors have been through? Creepy strangers, unexplainable incidents, narrow misses, etc. Part 2. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. My first job was working at a gas station. One night when business lulled after rush hour, a car drove up and the man inside had asked me for directions to a restaurant. I started giving him directions and he asked me to come closer because he couldn't hear very well over the noise from the street. I thought it was reasonable, so I took a couple steps closer to his car. As I was explaining how to get to the restaurant from the gas station, the man interrupted me and said, "You have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. I'd like to put them in a jar on my desk so I can look at them all day." The guy the first was working with quickly yanked me away from the man's car and told the creep that he needed to leave or the cops would be called. When I was a kid, the street I lived was built on a hill. I would walk my bike up it and zoom down it over and over again. There was a busy intersection at the bottom end of the street, so I knew to slow down and turn around at a certain point. One day I had a friend of the family over. He was around my age. I let him use an old bike of mine and we both started down the hill at the same time. Near the end of the street I turned to go back, but he raced right past me at full speed. Unfortunately, the bike I gave him didn't have handbrakes. It was the kind where you have to pedal backwards to stop. He was headed straight for the busy intersection and I remember yelling, "Pedal backwards, pedal backwards." He either didn't know what I was saying or he was going too fast to stop, so he kept picking up speed going right towards busy traffic. For about 2 to 3 seconds I thought at age 8 I was going to witness someone dying in front of me. Thankfully at the last second he bailed right and landed in a ditch on the side of the street. I've got a lot of ulcer-related problems. Stress, drinking, and smoking all play a really big part. This comes back into play later. After a really long drive, 10 hours plus, me and my friend finally get back to my place. For whatever reason I decided to take acid with about an hour left in the drive. I get back to my place, messing around, whatever. Eventually my friend goes to sleep and I start watching Netflix or something. Around 4 a.m., still tripping, I go to the bathroom to take a dump. What my friend didn't tell me was that he clogged it earlier with a big one himself. I walked in, sat down, and went on with my business. Now, as a result of my ulcers and a really long and stressful week, there was a lot of blood in my stool. At least half a cup of blood. I wiped, stood up when I was done, and flushed. There was a horrific gargling sound as the toilet gasped desperately for more air, or water. Whatever. Then, before I could comprehend, the toilet discharged back at me. Blood and feces shot over me and the walls, the LSD still in full effect. I froze. I contemplated my life and what I had deserved to be sent to hell. I made zero sound, I did not move an inch. About 5 minutes later I calmly walked out to the living room covered in blood, sweat, and tears. And doo-doo water. And nudged my friend on the couch. Quietly crying, I asked him if this was real life. So I'm around 4 years old and my mom takes me with her for some grocery shopping. She lets me walk around, but attempts to keep a close eye on me. Lo and behold, I decide to run off in search of some fruit roll-ups, those being my favorite candy at the time. I'm walking down an aisle and this seedy-looking guy turns around and starts talking to me. "Hey there son, where are you headed in such a hurry?" Mind you, I'm paraphrasing what he said, it's too far back to remember exactly. Anyways, he starts asking me questions. The first question being, "What's your favorite candy?" I of course let him know it's fruit roll-ups. So he says, "Can you help me pick one out for my daughter?" I say sure and he grabs my hand and walks me down the aisle and into another aisle. I remember this exactly because I made a comment regarding how there wasn't any candy in the aisle. Long story short, he is walking me around the store and my mom is freaking out. She runs to the help desk, or whatever the hell you call it, and tells them that her child is missing. The store goes on lockdown. The guy gets the hell out of there and I don't remember much after that. Now, I don't want to presume that this guy was a kidnapper, but now that I look back at the situation it seems kinda creepy. I'm one of 5 kids, and so growing up I shared a bed with my little sister. She had intense nightmares, that were probably worsened by the fact that when she woke up screaming, my preacher father would come in and pray over us, so that the demons in the room leave this place. One night, I woke up because I felt someone staring at me. My sister was fast asleep with her eyes wide open and glaring at me, and this horrible expression. It freaked me out so bad that I shook her awake and she started shrieking, "Get out," over and over, with her hands clamped to her face like she didn't want to see anything. Mama and Daddy tried giving her a bath to calm her down. She was little, like 5, and baths helped sometimes, but when she wouldn't stop screaming, they took her to the ER. She was severely dehydrated, but the doctors never really figured out what was wrong with her. P.S. This wasn't the only crazy stuff. She used to shake me awake, wailing, "There's a snake in the bed," or, "There's a spider on your face," and would be inconsolable for hours. Weird hallucinating 5-year-old girl, FTW. A few years ago I was driving to work in the left lane of Highway 101N in the middle of the Bay Area. Very high traffic highway. A big rig in the right lane slams on his brakes, jackknives all the way across the highway into the middle barricade. The 2 cars in front of me collide with it and the 3 cars behind me crash into each other. My car and the car next to me came out unscathed. Pictures of the cars behind and the cars and big rig in front. I was 16 years old. One Christmas vacation I hitchhiked from Chicago to Los Angeles, made it there in 57 hours, and back, took me 3 weeks. On the way back just outside Amarillo, Texas, I was out on the road about 10 p.m. It was very cold. A black Cadillac traveling westbound turned around, pulled up to me, and stopped. The passenger side window opened and the driver offered me a ride. We talked for a while and eventually the driver told me he was an entertainer. In his nightclub act he was known as the African Queen. As a relatively innocent 16-year-old, I didn't really appreciate what this meant. After traveling a short distance, the old, white, African Queen propositioned me and asked me to spend the night with him. I declined. He persisted. He asked again and again. Finally he stopped the car. I tried to open the door, but there was no door handle on the door. I could not get out. He put his hand on my leg, smiled, and said he wanted to please me. I got pissed. I said, in no uncertain terms, "If you don't let me out of this King car, I'll break your GMNED neck." He replied, "You don't have to get angry," opened the window. I reached outside the door, opened the door, got out, and he pulled away. I saw his black Cadillac take the next exit, cross over the highway, and continue back westbound. I worked the night shift at a hotel. Last night a young man walked in here. I didn't notice it immediately, but he was chewing on a razor blade. He had slit his wrists and the razor had done significant damage to his mouth. He merely wanted to use the phone to call his girlfriend. When I picked up the phone he said, "Why you gotta call the law on me?" and then promptly left. I'm glad this is my last week. I used to go to the University of Arizona in Tucson. One night some friends and I decided to go to Agua Prieta, Mexico, which is across from Douglas, Arizona. Agua Prieta is a shithole of a town. I met some Mexican friends and a few girls we knew at this club. After the club was closed, most of our other friends left and I was standing outside talking to one of the girls from the club and a bunch of other drunk Mexicans started yelling at me, calling me gringo, cabron, pendejo, the usual insults. I speak Spanish so I knew what they were saying. They started walking towards me throwing beer bottles, and on the other side of the street, a few policemen with shotguns drawn started walking towards me as well. The situation did not look very good at all. Me against about 12 people plus who the fuck knows what the police were going to do. I turned around and ran as fast as I could towards the border with beer bottles whizzing past me and breaking near my feet. Luckily I got to the border without getting my ass kicked or hit by any bottles. By the time I got the US border guard saw the people and police following me and basically told me I was lucky to get out of there alive. I never went back down there. Fuck that. A few months later, a Mexican-American friend of ours was killed down there. When I was a sophomore in high school, a friend would drive me home. One day we went to a record store with 2 other friends, and on the way back to drop me off, this guy in a truck passed us like an asshole, narrowly missing our car in oncoming traffic. We decided it'd be fun to follow him for a bit. So he turns onto another road shortly after and immediately pulls up to a mailbox and starts retrieving his mail. As we pass him, all 4 of us flip him off out the window and continue driving down the road. About a half-mile later, we see the same vehicle driving insanely fast behind us. He tailgates us for a bit while we start to panic a little. We start to slow down for a stop sign, and the guy whips around us and cuts us off, slamming on his brakes in front of us. We wait for just a moment, and he steps out of his car with a crowbar. We drive around him, but there's a stop sign in front of us, so we had to pause briefly. The guy runs towards my door, the rear passenger door, and grabs for it when my friend takes off. We're flying down this road, hoping to lose him. We make another turn onto a really busy street and we think we've lost him. We turn again and drive normally for a few miles, and at this point we're convinced we're safe. We pull up to another intersection and are waiting in the right turn lane, when we look behind us, and 2 or 3 cars behind us is the same dude, in the turning lane, flashing his headlights on and off. We make our turn and speed down the road, but so does the other guy. He speeds around us and slams on his brakes again, forcing us to stop. We try to go around him, but he keeps maneuvering so we can't get around. Eventually we stop and I say something stupid like, maybe he just wants to talk to us. So he's straddling both lanes of the road and gets out of his car with his crowbar in hand and a terrifying look on his face. My friend drives off the road, gets around the dude, and we speed away. He of course does the same and is driving like a fucking maniac, but so are we, so we maintain a bit of a lead on him. We make another turn and there's a school bus in front of us, just about to stop. We speed around it just in time for the bus stop sign to extend, and for some reason, the dude actually stops behind the bus, and we speed off. We were close to another friend's house, so we pull into their driveway and into the open garage. We're all terrified at this point, so we run inside and watch out the window for this asshole. He did drive past the house, but thank God we were parked in the garage so he didn't see the car. *TLDR*. Don't fuck with people, they might be crazy. Lived above a liquor store, old building, 3 stories, I'm on the top floor. Summer night, 1 a.m. In bed, windows open, barely awake. Building shudders slightly. Building sways again. It feels as if, kinda sounds as if, someone were repeatedly backing a Volkswagen Beetle into the building. And suddenly I'm wide awake, looking out the window. WTF? Nothing to see, but something just happened, and I'm pausing to throw on some pants before flying down 2 flights of stairs and arriving to find that the heavy glass plate door has been smashed through and there's some fucking kid in the shop. Surreal. I call out something like, WTF are you doing in there, and he comes for me. He had to, of course, because the only way out was the way he got in, so unless I was so intimidating that he needed to curl up in a dark corner of the shop and wait for the police to arrive, he had to make for the door. Not that I'm thinking any of this. I just watch him rush towards me as I stand my ground just a few feet away from the door. Neurotransmitters flood through my brain. The hypothalamus pituitary adrenal glands kick into overdrive, and the next thing I know I'm barefoot chasing some kid down the street. He's dripping packages of cigarettes and sippy bottles of booze, and I'm slapping my ass looking for my cell phone to call the police as I was chasing the kid. We pass a taxi and I scream for him to call the police and he hightails it out of there. I realize that my phone isn't on me, and with this realization my brain barely starts working again. I'm alone. What do I do when I catch him? Beat the hell out of him for some other guy's cigarettes? What if he has a knife or a gun? And then he slips down a darkened side street and I just stop running. That was a crazy brew of chemicals to slowly come down from as I rejoined my housemates who gathered outside the building. They looked at me with a kind of respect for the mad, but all I got was angry with myself. If he had actually come for me outside the building, what would I have done? It was all base stem of the brain reactions, fight or flight. He ran, so I chased. If he'd instead leapt at me with a knife, would I have suddenly learned kung fu? Probably not. I got lucky. I had the best possible outcome to that particular scenario. And to this day when I see those former housemates, they still look at me with the quiet respect you give to the insane. I'm hitchhiking for the first time ever in Jacksonville, Florida. As I wait by the side of the road in the cool morning air, a black Honda Civic spots me and swerves across 2 lanes of rush hour traffic, screeches to a halt, and offers me a ride. A savvy, street-smart person would think, a normal person would never go through so much effort to pick up a hitchhiker. Fuck this guy. As a naive and sheltered middle-class beardless boy I think, awesome, a ride. So I hop in. I look at this son of a bitch, past his innocent chubby cheeks into his beady eyes and say, thanks. He lingers in silence and lounges in the driver's seat like someone in a recliner watching 5 men wishing he were brave enough to hang himself. The comic book guy doppelganger mutters, this is a terrible place to hitchhike, all the traffic is going downtown for work. I'll take you to a better exit down the freeway. This is the point where my comfort in the car declines exponentially. We begin small talk. And after a few minutes he starts rubbing his wiener through his jeans. I see this in my peripheral and I'm not quite sure what this blurry circular motion is. So I quick peek. And the gravity of the situation dawns on me. He's revving up for the big race. I hide my pepper spray on the far side of my body and try to distract him from the impending penis reveal. So I rapid fire ask him questions. What's your favorite book? What's your favorite movie? Do you like 2% milk? He swats my questions away with grunts and disinterest and increases the RPMs. I watch him to make sure he doesn't reach for a gun. I consider pepper spraying him if he does something threatening, but pepper spraying a driver at 70 miles per hour entails mutually assured destruction. My mind races. Then with incredible sleight of hand the dick magician releases the main attraction and his dick Houdinis its way from captivity. He looks at me with a faint smirk. Silence lingers and I look straight ahead. His fleshy member wanders about freely. I see all of this in my peripheral. It takes a lot of courage to look at a grown man's dick dead on, courage I didn't have. My heart beats quickly, loudly. He breaks the silence. Does this make you nervous? I reply immediately, hell yeah it does. Are you kidding me? This is not a part of my everyday life, man. He flares his nostrils and says, good answer. I just had some really good times when I was hitchhiking at your age and figured you might want to, jerk off for me. So I chime in with a, no thanks, that's not my thing. Can you drop me off and put your wang away? His face reddens with embarrassment as if his high school sweetheart just turned him down. Yeah. He sheaths his sword of omens. So he drops me off. I get out of the car and my nervousness falls away. I fall to the ground laughing. How ridiculous. What a way to start my hitching adventure across the country. On some level 1 respect him though. It's hard enough to talk to strangers or ask someone on a date, let alone whip your dick out. TLDR the first time I hitchhiked the comic book guy doppelganger whips his dick out and asks me to jerk off for him. A buddy of mine asked me and 3 other friends of ours to come over and help him remove some trees. So we had 2 chainsaws going and the friend who owns the land was cutting down a tree when the tree I was cutting fell in the wrong direction and pinned his leg and hand to the ground. Instantly me and my other friend all had adrenaline running through us and 3 of us picked up a 15-meter tree and freed our friend. A couple days after that we tried to pick up the same tree and it would not budge. Freaky how strong you can be when adrenaline is pumping through you. Oh, and my friend lived with a couple broken bones. Okay, a couple of things you need to know first. When I was approximately 2 years old my parents and I lived in a house that my grandparents owned. Although only 2, I apparently could speak quite well in full sentences. My parents' bedroom was connected to mine through the closet, meaning you could walk into their closet, go through a door in back and end up in the back of my closet. My mom started having these terrible nightmares. In her dream, she would wake up surrounded by fire. She'd rush through the closet to my room, scoop me up and dive out the window. Suddenly it would flash forward and her and my dad would be sitting in a waiting room at a hospital. A doctor would come in, looking somber and say, I'm sorry, but... She'd wake up at that point, sweating profusely and her heart racing. One night, she woke up to me screaming. She ran into my room and pulled me into her arms, calming me down and asking me what was wrong. My response was, Mommy, my room was on fire. I was on fire. Of course this freaked her the fuck out. I'm willing to admit that me having some sort of similar nightmare may have been caused by me overhearing a conversation about my mom's nightmares, but that's not the freaky part. Not too long after this we moved out, though not because of the nightmares my mom was having. We lived in southern Illinois at the time, and my parents were having a hard time making enough money to support us living there, so we moved up to northern Illinois. My grandparents sold that house once we moved. About 6 months after we moved out my mom was talking to my grandma on the phone. My grandma started telling my mom about how the house we used to live in had caught on fire. No one was home at the time, but the bedroom that had been mine had been completely destroyed. The fire had started because of an electrical short in the closet I spoke of before. This story always gives me chills when I tell it. When I was very young, about 3 or maybe 4, I was at a BMX race meet with my dad and my brother. I thought I was a big girl then and insisted that my dad let me walk the couple of 100 meters down the hill to the snacks van to get an ice cream. Since the whole walk, and me standing to buy the ice cream was all inside of my dad, he said okay, gave me some coins and sent me down the hill. I went down and stood in line, the lovely ladies helped me and I got the ice cream I wanted. I was smiled at by the couple of people lined up behind me to make purchases. And I grinned all the way back up the hill while I enjoyed my ice cream. I sat down under our little tarpaulin tent, shade set up to eat the rest, when boom, the snack van exploded into a huge fucking fireball. The 2 ladies that worked there and 2 of the people who had stood in the line behind me died. Apparently one of the huge gas cylinders on the side of the van that powered the burners inside had sprung a leak and just went up. I dropped my ice cream and ran and hid under the tarpaulin at the back of our tent, and apparently was screaming for hours. My dad really had to struggle to get me out and home. I don't remember too much of it really. I do remember the fireball, and being able to feel the heat of it, and oddly, I always remembered the faces of the lady who gave me my ice cream and the people in line behind me. I was delivering for Jimmy John's one night in downtown St. Paul, MN. At the intersection on Roberts plus 10th Street, the light turned yellow. On average, I would say I went through that light on about 1/3 of my deliveries at least once. This particular time I decided not to go through the yellow light. I began to slow to a stop. Not but a second afterwards, 2 cars blew the red light on both sides of the intersection. Had I pushed that yellow, I would have been T-boned on both sides. During finals week at college, I left the library pretty close to midnight and decided to carry my laptop to my car, which was a block and a half away down a side street. I was completely alone and my phone was dead, but it was pretty well lit, so I figured I'd be okay. As I was walking, a pickup truck driving the opposite way slowed down and did a K-turn behind me and started following me. I immediately stopped, let it pass and stood by a lamppost until it made a turn, down the street where my car was. I went back to the library and asked public safety to walk me to my car. As we got closer, the truck that had been following me was idle in the space directly behind my car and sped off down the street as soon as he saw me and the cop. I almost didn't go back and get public safety because I felt I was being too paranoid. Note: never be too paranoid. Quote: tandem skydive. During orientation, I was trained to pull the ripcord at the indicated moment. The instructor did not provide the anticipated indication. Instead, he pulled it himself with no warning. The sudden, unexpected change in velocity convinced me that something had gone wrong and that I had disconnected from the instructor. I was, for the briefest moment, 100% convinced that I was in free fall without a parachute. Just as quickly, we were leisurely floating under the canopy. But that brief moment was the most frightening of my life. Many years ago, some friends and I walked out to the end of a stone breakwall on Lake Erie in a thick fog. Suddenly we heard a groaning and creaking, and out of the fog emerges a fucking house. 3 stories tall, peeling paint, hovering on the water. Needless to say, we ran like hell. 2 days later, we learned the house was being moved by barge to a new location nearby. I did not know you could float a 3-story Victorian. Many years back, I was driving along rather late at night on a road near the hospital I was interning at, in a shady part of Detroit, back when the city was even more dangerous. There were only a few cars on the road at that time, and at that time I had been living there for only a few months, so I did not know about most of the dangers that were present in that city. People buying old cop cars and pulling over people and robbing them, people jacking cars that were stopped at red lights, etc. Anyway, my damn car's tire suddenly gets wrecked and I managed to pull to the side of the road. It was late, in one of the many bad parts of town, but I did not really understand that at the time. I am not a native of the city, so I got out and get ready to change my tires. I was not a member of the AAA. I was working on the back tire that was shredded when suddenly another car pulled up and stopped right in front of my car. I assumed he was there to help me, stupid, so I got up to talk to him. The man in the other car got out, and proceeded to walk over and crouch near my front tire with some tools, and started to take the tire off. I was rather confused at this, so I asked the man, "Hey, what are you doing?" He stopped to turn to me, face completely serious, and said, "You take the back tires and the radio. I'll take the front tires and the battery, fair." It took me a moment to register that he was indeed stealing my tires, so I just blurted out without thinking, "This is my car." The other guy stopped, stared at me for a few seconds, then picked up his tools, got in his car, and left. I finished changing the tires, and only a few minutes later did I realize how dangerous it was being alone by a car on a dark stretch of road in the bad part of town. That does not mean it was not funny in retrospect, though. I live in rural Ohio, and on my way home from work one night, driving a '94 Honda Accord, I had to stop for 2 deer in the road. About 50 yards in front of me, a car in the other lane was turning left and the driver behind him wasn't paying attention, rear-ending him, pushing his car into my lane where I surely would have hit him had I not stopped for the deer. Less than a week later, I bought a brand new 2003 Jeep Wrangler, 16 miles on it. When I drove it off the lot, about 10 miles away from the car lot driving home, a deer jumps in front of me, smashing the front right panel, door, and denting the hood. $1,700 worth of damage. TLDR. Deer saves me from car accident in old car. 3 days later in brand new car I hit a deer. Trolled by deer. I worked at a Hooters. One day I was taken into the office and my manager showed me a note written from someone who claimed to be in jail. He said before he went back to jail he had seen me at a Walmart, and specified a day I remembered being there, and had recognized me as someone he knew when I was a child. He then went on to talk about how he had asked my dad for permission to marry me and that my father never let him see me again. He talked about love notes that he sent me and that now that he had found me, he was going to reunite with me in a couple weeks when he got released from jail. He left a number to reach one of his friends, and when my manager Googled the number, the first result was a contact number for a white painter's van that my manager swore he had seen in the parking lot some nights. Needless to say, I was walked to my car for the remainder of my career there.